The telegram arrived on a Tuesday morning in Baltimore, smelling faintly of dust and distance, and Catherine Montgomery held it in her trembling hands while reading the words that would change everything. Proposal accepted. Train tickets enclosed. Wedding upon arrival. J. Holloway, Montana Territory. She had answered the advertisement in the newspaper 3 weeks prior, desperate and nearly penniless after her father's death, had left her with nothing but debts and the cold shoulder of relatives who considered her a burden. The advertisement had been simple enough. Rancher in Montana Territory seeks educated wife, must be hardy and willing to work, respond with references. Catherine had fabricated half her references, embellished her hardiness, and posted the letter before her courage could fail her. Now, in April of 1884, she stood in the cramped boarding-house room she could no longer afford, staring at a one-way ticket to a place called Bitterroot Valley, and a man she had never met, her landlady, Mrs. Hewitt, knocked sharply on the door. "Rent's due tomorrow, Miss Montgomery." "Haven't forgotten, have you? I will be departing tomorrow morning," Catherine called back, her voice steadier than she felt. "I am settling my affairs today." She heard the woman's dissatisfied grunt through the thin door, followed by retreating footsteps. Catherine turned to her mirror, studying the face that would soon belong to Mrs. J. Holloway. She was 22 years old. With dark hair she kept pinned severely at the nape of her neck, gray eyes that her mother had once called thoughtful, and a mouth that smiled less frequently than it used to. Her father had taught her to read Latin and keep account books, skills that had proven useless in securing respectable employment for a woman alone. The teaching positions required references she did not have. The factory work paid too little to cover lodging. Marriage to a stranger 2,000 miles away had become not just an option but a necessity. The train journey took 6 days. Catherine watched the landscape transform outside her window. Cities giving way to farmland, farmland to prairie, prairie to something wilder and more vast than she had imagined possible. The other passengers changed at each major stop, but Catherine rode on, clutching her carpetbag and the small trunk that contained everything she owned. She shared crackers with a minister's wife heading to Denver, listened to a salesman's boisterous stories about San Francisco, and tried not to think too hard about what awaited her at the end of the line. The train reached Missoula on a bright morning that made the surrounding mountains look like something from a painting. Catherine stepped onto the platform with legs unsteady from days of travel, her gray traveling dress wrinkled despite her best efforts, and looked around for a man she would only recognize from his brief written description. Tall, dark-haired, will be wearing a brown hat. Half the men on the platform fit that description. "Miss Montgomery," she turned. The man standing 3 feet away was indeed tall, perhaps 30 years old, with dark hair visible beneath a worn brown Stetson. His face was weathered from sun and wind, with lines around his eyes that suggested he squinted often against bright skies. He wore a clean shirt, dusty trousers, and scuffed boots, and he held his hat in his hands with an awkwardness that might have been endearing under different circumstances. "Mr. Holloway," she said, extending her hand formally. He looked at her hand for a moment, then shook it gently. His palm was calloused, his grip careful. "James," he said. "Just James, if you are willing. The Reverend is waiting at the church. I thought, if you need time, we could." "I am prepared to proceed," Catherine said, because what else could she say? She had spent her last dollars on the journey here. There was no money for a hotel room, no possibility of return. She had come here to marry this stranger, and marry him she would. The church was small and made of wood that still looked new. The Reverend was a cheerful man with a Scottish accent who seemed determined to make the brief ceremony as warm as possible. There were two witnesses, a middle-aged couple James introduced as Tom and Mary Brennan, neighbors who ran the general store in the small town of Stevensville, 20 miles from James's ranch. Mary squeezed Catherine's hand and whispered, "Welcome, dear. It will be all right." Catherine wanted to believe her. She spoke her vows in a steady voice, sliding her mother's thin gold band off her right hand and onto her left when James produced no ring of his own. He looked embarrassed by this, but Catherine simply nodded to indicate it was acceptable. His own vows were quiet, his voice deeper than she had expected. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, James did not kiss her. He simply nodded once, thanked the Reverend, and led her out to where a wagon waited with 2 horses hitched to it. "The ranch is about 3 hours from here," James said as he helped her into the wagon seat. His hands on her waist were brief and impersonal. "We will arrive before dark. I brought blankets in case you are cold." The countryside they traveled through was beautiful in a way that made Catherine's chest ache. Rolling hills stretched in every direction, greening with spring grass. Cottonwood trees lined a river that James told her was the Bitterroot. Mountains rose in the distance, still crowned with snow. They passed other ranches, other homesteads, fields where cattle grazed. James pointed things out occasionally, his voice quiet. "That is the Brennan place. Those are my cattle in that north pasture. The mountains there, those are the Bitterroots." Catherine nodded and tried to absorb it all. The air smelled different here, cleaner somehow, sharp with pine and earth. The sky seemed impossibly large. "I should tell you about the ranch," James said finally, as they turned onto a narrower track that wound between 2 hills. "It is not fancy. I have been working it for 7 years, built most of the buildings myself. There is the main house, a barn, a chicken coop, and a bunkhouse for when I hire help during branding and roundup. I run about 200 head of cattle right now. It is a decent living, but it is hard work." "I am prepared to work," Catherine said. James glanced at her, something unreadable in his eyes. "I am sure you are." The house came into view as they crested a small rise. It was a single-story structure made of logs, with a covered porch across the front and a chimney at one end. It was larger than Catherine had feared, but smaller than she had hoped, sitting in a clearing with the barn and other outbuildings nearby. A garden plot had been fenced off to one side, though nothing grew in it yet. James brought the wagon to a stop in front of the house and climbed down. He came around to help Catherine down, and this time she accepted his hand, stepping carefully in her city shoes. "I will show you inside," he said. The house consisted of 4 rooms, a main living area with a kitchen at one end and a fireplace at the other, 2 bedrooms, and a small room James said he used for storage and keeping accounts. The furniture was simple but well made. A table with 4 chairs, a rocking chair near the fireplace, cupboards and shelves, a cookstove that looked nearly new. Everything was clean, almost obsessively so, as though James had scrubbed the place from top to bottom before her arrival. "That room is yours," James said, gesturing to the larger of the 2 bedrooms. "I will sleep in the other one." Catherine turned to look at him, surprised. "We are married." His face reddened slightly. "I know that, but I figured. You do not know me, I will not force anything. When you are ready, if you are ready, you can say so. Until then, you have your own space." Something in Catherine's chest loosened slightly. She had been braced for demands, for the rights a husband could legally claim. This unexpected courtesy felt like a reprieve. "Thank you," she said quietly. James nodded, looking uncomfortable. "I will bring your trunk in. There is a pump out back for water. The outhouse is past the chicken coop. I usually cook simple meals, but if you know how to cook, I will not stop you. If you do not, I can teach you what I know, which is not much." "I can cook adequately," Catherine said. It was mostly true. She had learned the basics from the boarding house cook in exchange for helping with dishes. Good. That is good. James stood there for another moment, then seemed to collect himself. I need to check on the cattle before dark. Make yourself comfortable. There is food in the cupboard if you are hungry. I will be back in a few hours. He left quickly, almost as though he was fleeing. Catherine heard the wagon rattle away and then stood alone in the silent house, in the middle of the Montana Territory, married to a man who was essentially a stranger. She explored slowly, opening cupboards to find them neatly stocked with flour, beans, coffee, canned goods. The bedroom James had given her contained a double bed with a simple quilt, a dresser, a washstand, and a window that looked out toward the mountains. Her trunk sat at the foot of the bed where James had placed it. Catherine unpacked mechanically, hanging her 2 dresses on pegs, placing her undergarments and nightdress in the dresser, arranging her few books on the windowsill. She had brought her father's copy of Virgil, a volume of Tennyson's poems, and a book about medicinal herbs that had belonged to her mother. When her unpacking was complete, she stood in the middle of the room and felt the enormity of what she had done wash over her. She was in Montana Territory. She was married. She would never see Baltimore again, never walk the streets she had known all her life, never visit her parents' graves. This strange, silent house was her home now, and the quiet man who had driven her here was her husband. Catherine did not cry. She had learned over the past year that crying solved nothing. Instead, she changed into her simpler day dress, found an apron hanging in the kitchen, and began to make supper. James returned as the sun was setting, washing at the pump outside before entering the house. He stopped in the doorway, staring at the table where Catherine had laid out biscuits, beans, and fried salt pork. "You did not have to do that," he said. "I needed to eat as well," Catherine replied. "Please sit." They ate in awkward silence. James complimented the biscuits twice, then seemed to run out of things to say. Catherine asked about the cattle, and he explained about the spring calving season, about moving the herd to higher pastures in summer, about the work that needed doing. His voice became more animated when he talked about the ranch, and Catherine found herself listening carefully, trying to understand this life she had entered. "I do not mean to just order you about," James said suddenly, setting down his fork. "I know some men. I know you probably expect that I will just tell you what to do and expect you to obey, but that is not how I want this to be." Catherine looked at him, puzzled. "Then how do you want this to be?" James met her eyes, and for the first time she saw something earnest and vulnerable in his expression. "This ranch is yours as much as mine," he said. "You are my wife, not my hired help. I want you to have a say in how things are run. I want your opinions. If you see something that needs changing, you can change it. If you have ideas, I want to hear them. I have been alone here for a long time, and I want a partner, not a servant." Catherine stared at him. In her father's house, she had never been asked her opinion on anything important. In the boarding house, she had been told when to rise, when to work, when to eat. The idea that she might have authority, that her thoughts might matter, was so foreign that she barely knew how to respond. "I do not know anything about ranching," she said finally. "You will learn. I will teach you." James smiled, a small, hesitant expression that softened his weathered face. "I am not saying you have to birth calves or break horses, but this is our ranch, our home. I want you to feel like it is yours." "Why?" The question came out before Catherine could stop it. "Why would you offer that? Most men would not." James was quiet for a long moment. "My mother," he said finally, "worked herself to death on a farm in Ohio, following my father's orders, never allowed to speak up even when she saw a better way to do things. I watched her fade away, watched the light go out of her eyes. When she died, I was 17. I swore I would never do that to a woman. If I ever married, it would be a partnership. He looked down at his plate. I know you did not have much choice in coming here. I know you probably answered my advertisement because you needed to, but I am hoping that, in time, you will want to stay. And that starts with you knowing this place is as much yours as mine. Catherine felt something shift inside her chest, a crack in the wall she had built around herself. This strange, quiet man was offering her something she had never had: a voice, a place, a partnership. She did not love him, but in that moment she felt the first stirring of respect. "Thank you," she said softly. "I will try to be a good partner." James nodded, his expression relieved. "That is all I ask." The days that followed established a rhythm. Catherine rose early, as she always had, and found James already up, often returning from checking the cattle or feeding the horses. She made breakfast while he did the morning chores, and they ate together as the sun came up over the mountains. James taught her about the animals, showing her how to feed the chickens and collect eggs, how to milk the cow he kept for dairy, how to judge if a horse needed its hooves checked. He was a patient teacher, never mocking her city-bred ignorance, always willing to show her something twice or three times until she understood. Catherine, in turn, took charge of the house and began planning a proper garden. She discovered that James, for all his competence with animals and building, had no idea how to preserve food or manage household stores efficiently. She reorganized the pantry, made lists of what they would need from town, and started seeds in tin cans on the sunny windowsill. "Where did you learn all this?" James asked one evening, watching her carefully transplant seedlings into larger containers. "Books mostly," Catherine admitted. "My father believed in education, even for a daughter, and I learned some practical things from necessity this past year." "Your father," James said carefully. "You have not spoken much about your family." Catherine's hand stilled. "There is not much to say. My mother died when I was 12. My father was a school teacher, a good man, but not practical with money. When he died last year, I discovered he had debts I knew nothing about. Everything was sold. I had no family willing to take me in, or at least none willing to do so without making me feel like a burden." She forced herself to continue working, not looking at him. "I tried to find respectable employment. It was not as easy as I had imagined. When I saw your advertisement, it seemed like a better option than the alternatives available to me." "I am sorry," James said quietly, "that you lost them, that you were put in that position." "It is the way of the world," Catherine kept her voice steady. "Women alone have few options. You are not alone anymore." She looked up then, meeting his eyes. He was not smiling, but his expression was serious, sincere. "No," she said slowly, "I suppose I am not." That night, lying in her bed in the dark, Catherine thought about her new husband. James Holloway was nothing like what she had expected. He was quiet but not cold, serious but capable of dry humor, strong but surprisingly gentle. He never raised his voice, never made demands, never treated her as anything less than an equal. When she had opinions about how to organize the kitchen or where to plant the garden, he listened and usually agreed. When she asked questions about the ranch, he answered thoroughly, as though her interest mattered. She still slept alone in her room, and James never suggested otherwise. Sometimes she wondered if he regretted his offer, if he wished he had married someone more suitable, someone who already knew how to live this life. But he never said so, and gradually, Catherine began to feel less like an interloper and more like someone who belonged. 3 weeks after her arrival, James announced they would go into Stevensville for supplies. Catherine dressed carefully in her better-day dress and bonnet, nervous about meeting more of the people who would be her neighbors. The town was small, little more than a main street with a handful of buildings. The general store, a saloon, a church, a hotel, a blacksmith shop. But people called out greetings to James as they drove in, and he introduced Catherine to everyone they met. "This is my wife, Catherine," he said, again and again, with what sounded like pride in his voice. Mary Brennan bustled out of the general store when she saw them, embracing Catherine like an old friend. "How are you settling in, dear? Is James treating you well? If he gives you any trouble, you just let Tom know and he will set him straight." "I am settling in well, thank you," Catherine said, surprised by the woman's warmth. "James has been very kind." "Kind? Well, that is good to hear. Most of these cowboys have the manners of wild horses, but James always was different." Mary patted her arm. "You must come for supper soon. It will be good for you to have another woman to talk to. Lord knows these men do not provide much conversation." Inside the store, Catherine helped James select supplies while Mary kept up a steady stream of talk about the other families in the valley. The upcoming church social, the winter that had finally released its grip. Tom Brennan, a stocky man with graying hair, weighed out flour and beans and asked James about his cattle. "Heard you lost a few head to wolves this spring," Tom said. James nodded grimly. "3 calves. I have been riding the northern pasture more often, but those wolves are smart. I may need to hire someone to help keep watch." "Young Billy Harper is looking for work," Tom suggested. "Good kid, responsible. His father's place is too small to support all those boys." "I will talk to him," James said. He glanced at Catherine. "If that is acceptable to you." He would need to stay in the bunkhouse during the week. Catherine felt Mary and Tom both look at her with interest. She realized that James was serious about including her in decisions, even in front of others. "If you trust him, then yes, of course," she said. James smiled slightly and turned back to Tom. "Tell Billy to come by next week. We will work out terms." As they loaded supplies into the wagon, a woman approached hesitantly. She was younger than Catherine, perhaps 20, with blonde hair and a thin, worn face. She carried a baby on her hip and had a small child clinging to her skirts. "Mr. Holloway," she said softly, "I heard you might be hiring. My husband, he is a good worker if you need someone for the summer." James's expression was kind. "What is your husband's name, madam?" "Peter Schultz. We have the homestead about 5 miles north of your place, but the crops did not do well last year and we are struggling." Her voice dropped lower. "We need the work, sir." Catherine saw James hesitate. "I was planning to hire Billy Harper," he said slowly. "But I could use 2 men during branding. Tell your husband to come see me. We will work something out." The woman's face flooded with relief. "Thank you, Mr. Holloway. Thank you so much. God bless you." As they drove away, Catherine looked at her husband. "That was kind of you." James shrugged. "The Schultzes are having a hard time. Peter is a good worker, just had bad luck. If I can help, I should." He glanced at her. "It will mean more expense paying 2 men, but we can afford it and they need it. If you disagree—" "I do not disagree," Catherine said firmly. "I think it is the right thing to do." James's smile was warmer this time. "Good. I am glad we agree." On the ride home, Catherine felt something new stirring inside her. This life was hard, certainly, and strange, and nothing like what she had known. But there was a goodness here, in this man beside her, in the community that was beginning to welcome her. For the first time since her father's death, she felt a small flicker of something that might have been hope. Spring deepened into early summer. The garden Catherine had planted grew with astonishing speed, and she spent her mornings weeding and watering while James and the newly hired Billy Harper worked with the cattle. Peter Schultz came 3 days a week, and Catherine made sure to send him home each time with extra food, which he accepted with quiet gratitude. The work was constant, but Catherine found she did not mind it as much as she had expected. There was a satisfaction in watching her garden flourish, in mastering the skills of this new life. She learned to bake bread in the temperamental cook stove, to churn butter, to identify the plants Mary Brennan taught her could be used for medicine and cooking. Her hands, once soft, developed calluses. Her skin, despite her bonnet, took on color from the sun. James continued to treat her with careful respect, maintaining the boundaries he had established. They worked together, ate together, talked more easily as the days passed. Catherine learned about his life before Montana, his family in Ohio, his decision to come west after his mother's death. James asked about her childhood, her education, her dreams before her father's death. "I used to think I might be a teacher," Catherine admitted one evening as they sat on the porch after supper, watching the sun set behind the mountains. "I loved learning, loved books. I thought I could pass that on to children." "You still could," James said. "Some of the families around here do not have easy access to schooling. If you wanted to teach a few children, even just in winter when the work is slower, I would support that." Catherine looked at him in surprise. "You would? Why would I not? You are educated, you have knowledge worth sharing." "If teaching is something you want to do, you should do it." He met her eyes. "I meant what I said, Catherine. This is your home too, your life. I do not want you to give up everything you are just because you married me." "I gave up very little," Catherine said softly. "I had almost nothing left to give up. You have given me far more than I have given you." James shook his head. "You have given me a home. Before you came, this was just a place I worked and slept. Now it feels like more than that. You have made it that way." Catherine felt warmth spread through her chest. "I am glad," she said quietly. And she meant it. In late June, Mary Brennan organized a church social, and half the valley seemed to attend. Catherine met more neighbors. The Johnsons, who had 5 children and a sprawling ranch. The elderly Mr. Foster, who told long stories about the early days of the territory. A widow named Mrs. Chen, whose husband had worked on the railroad and who now ran a successful vegetable farm. Everyone was kind, welcoming Catherine and treating her as though she had always belonged. During the meal, Catherine found herself talking with Sarah Johnson, a woman near her own age who seemed to manage her large household with effortless competence. "I am still learning," Catherine admitted when Sarah asked how she was adjusting. "Everything here is so different from Baltimore." "You are from Baltimore. Oh, how wonderful. I have never been farther east than St. Louis." Sarah smiled warmly. "You must miss it terribly." Catherine considered that. "I thought I would," she said slowly. "But I find I do not as much as I expected. This place, it is beautiful, and the people have been kind." "James is a good man," Sarah said. "Everyone respects him. He is honest, fair, works harder than most." "You are lucky to have him." "I am beginning to realize that," Catherine said. She looked across the churchyard to where James stood talking with a group of other ranchers, his hat pushed back on his head, his expression relaxed in a way she rarely saw. As though sensing her gaze, he turned and met her eyes, and something passed between them, a wordless acknowledgement that warmed Catherine from the inside out. That night, as they drove home under a sky full of stars, James said, "You seemed happy today." "I was," Catherine said. "Everyone was welcoming. I feel less like an outsider now." "You were never an outsider to me." Catherine looked at him, at his profile in the moonlight. "No," she said softly. "You have been kind from the beginning. I do not think I properly thanked you for that." "You do not need to thank me for basic decency, Catherine." "Perhaps not. But I do thank you anyway." She took a breath. "James, I want you to know, I am happy here, happier than I have been in a long time. You have given me a home, a purpose, a life I never imagined I could have." "I am grateful for that, and I am grateful for you." James was silent for a long moment. Then he said, his voice rough, "I am grateful for you too, more than you know." Something shifted between them in that moment, something subtle but profound. The careful distance they had maintained began to feel less like protection and more like an obstacle. When they reached the ranch, James helped Catherine down from the wagon. His hands lingered on her waist a moment longer than necessary, and when she looked up at him, she saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. "Catherine," he said quietly, "I want you to know. I have feelings for you, real feelings. I did not expect that when I placed that advertisement. I thought I was looking for a practical arrangement, a partner to share the work. But you are more than that to me, much more." Catherine's heart pounded. "James, you do not have to say anything. I know we agreed to take time. I am not asking for anything you are not ready to give. I just wanted you to know." He stepped back, releasing her. "Good night, Catherine." He walked away toward the barn to tend the horses, leaving Catherine standing in the yard, her mind spinning. She went inside, moving through the dark house to her bedroom, and sat on the edge of her bed with her hands pressed to her warm cheeks. She had not expected this. She had not expected to care for him, this quiet rancher who had married her sight unseen. But somewhere in the past 2 months, between the shared meals and the patient lessons and the 1,000 small kindnesses, something had grown. She respected him. She liked him. And more than that, she was beginning to love him. The realization should have frightened her. Instead, it felt like coming home. The next morning, Catherine rose early and made breakfast as usual. When James came in from the barn, she poured him coffee and set a plate in front of him, then sat down across the table. "James," she said before she could lose her courage. "What you said last night." He looked up, his expression carefully neutral. "I should not have said anything. I did not mean to make you uncomfortable. You did not make me uncomfortable." Catherine took a breath. "I have feelings for you too. I did not expect to. I thought this would be a practical arrangement, nothing more. But you have been so kind, so good to me. You have given me respect and partnership and a home, and I find that I care for you very much." James stared at her, his coffee cup frozen halfway to his mouth. "Catherine, I do not expect you to believe me right away. I know I am not experienced in these matters, but I wanted you to know." She twisted her hands together in her lap. "You have been patient with me, giving me time and space. I appreciate that more than I can say, but I think, if you are willing, I would like to truly be your wife, in all ways." James set down his cup carefully. "Are you certain? I do not want you to feel pressured." "I am certain." Catherine met his eyes. "I trust you, James, and I want this. I want you." He stood slowly, moving around the table. Catherine rose to meet him, and when he took her hands, his grip was warm and solid. "I never imagined I could feel this way about someone," he said softly. "You have changed everything for me, Catherine. You have made this place a home. You have made me happier than I have ever been." "Then we are even," Catherine said, "because you have done the same for me." James lifted one hand to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing gently across her cheekbone. "May I kiss you?" Catherine's answer was to rise on her toes and press her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, both of them learning. Then James's arms came around her, pulling her closer, and Catherine felt herself melt against him. She had been kissed only once before, an awkward fumbling thing with a boy at a church social when she was 16. This was nothing like that. This was warmth and rightness and a sense of finally finding where she belonged. When they broke apart, both breathless, James rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said quietly. "I think I have been falling in love with you since the day you first made me dinner and looked at me like I was a puzzle you wanted to solve." Catherine laughed, the sound shaky but genuine. "I love you too. I think I started falling when you told me this ranch was mine as much as yours." No one had ever given me that kind of partnership before. Then we are both fortunate, James said, to have found each other. That night, for the first time, Catherine did not sleep in the smaller bedroom. She lay in James's arms in the larger bed, her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. They had loved each other with a tenderness that brought tears to Catherine's eyes, James's careful patience meeting her nervous willingness, until nervousness gave way to wonder and joy. "No regrets," James murmured into her hair. "None," Catherine said firmly. "You. Only that I did not tell you sooner how I felt." Catherine smiled against his chest. "We had time. We needed time, but I think we are ready now." "Yes," James agreed, his arms tightening around her. "I think we are." The summer passed in a blur of work and happiness. Catherine's garden produced abundantly, and she spent long days preserving food for the winter, drying beans, canning vegetables, making preserves from the wild berries James showed her how to find. The cattle fattened on summer grass, and James worked long hours moving them to higher pastures, repairing fences, branding new calves. Catherine often rode out with him, learning to handle a horse with more confidence, learning to see the land the way he did. They were partners in every sense, discussing decisions large and small. When Catherine suggested they try raising pigs for meat, James helped her build a pen and purchased 2 young piglets from a farmer in the valley. When James worried about the winter hay supply, Catherine helped him calculate how much they would need and strategize the harvest. They disagreed sometimes, but they learned to talk through differences until they reached a compromise both could accept. At night, they lay together in the darkness and talked, sharing stories from their pasts, dreams for the future. James spoke of expanding the ranch, perhaps purchasing more land to the north. Catherine mentioned again the possibility of teaching children in the winter. They talked about children of their own, a possibility that both excited and frightened Catherine. "I know nothing about being a mother," she admitted one night in August. "My own mother died when I was so young. What if I do not know what to do?" "Then we will figure it out together," James said practically. "I know nothing about being a father either, but I think if we love our children and do our best, that will be enough." In September, Catherine realized her monthly courses had not come. She waited another week to be certain, then told James over breakfast, her voice trembling slightly with nerves and excitement. James's face lit up with a joy so profound it took Catherine's breath away. "A baby! We are having a baby, I think so." "Yes." He swept her into his arms, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around the kitchen, both of them laughing. When he set her down, his hands were gentle on her still flat stomach, his expression awed. "We are having a baby," he repeated, as though saying it again would make it more real. "Catherine, I did not think I could be happier than I already was, but this—" "I know," Catherine said, covering his hands with hers. "I feel the same." Mary Brennan was delighted when Catherine shared the news on their next trip to town. She immediately began offering advice, most of it practical, some of it contradictory. "You must rest more, but also stay active. It is good for the baby. Eat plenty of good food, but not too much or you will get too big. Do not lift anything heavy. But do not become an invalid either. That is worse." Catherine listened patiently, accepting the wisdom and ignoring the parts that made no sense. Sarah Johnson, who had birthed 5 healthy children, was more straightforward in her advice. "It will hurt," she said bluntly, "but women have been doing this since the beginning of time. Your body knows what to do, trust it, and make sure you have someone with you who has done this before. Mary would be good, or I would be happy to come." "I would be grateful for your help," Catherine said sincerely. "Both of you, if you are willing." As autumn arrived, painting the valley in shades of gold and crimson, Catherine's body began to change. She felt tired more often, and certain smells made her nauseous. But she also felt a deep sense of contentment, watching her body prepare to nurture the life growing inside her. James was attentive almost to the point of being overbearing, trying to prevent her from doing any work he deemed too strenuous. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," Catherine told him in exasperation after he tried to stop her from carrying a basket of eggs. "Women have been doing work while pregnant since time began. I know. I just worry." "Then worry less and trust me more. I will tell you if something is too much." She softened her voice. "I appreciate that you care, but I need to be useful, James. I need to work. It is part of who I am." James nodded slowly. "You are right. I am sorry. I will try to worry less." "You can worry a reasonable amount," Catherine said with a small smile. "Just not so much that you drive me mad." They held hands across the table, a moment of understanding passing between them. This was marriage, Catherine thought, this constant negotiation, this learning each other's needs and fears. And she was grateful for it, even when it was difficult. Winter came early that year, snow falling in October and blanketing the valley in white. James worked harder than ever, making sure the cattle were safe, the hay stores adequate, the house prepared for the cold months ahead. Catherine cooked and preserved and kept the house warm, her belly growing rounder as the days grew shorter. In November, they celebrated her birthday quietly, just the two of them. James had carved her a beautiful wooden box for her keepsakes, the lid engraved with her initials. Catherine gave him a new shirt she had sewn herself, the stitches careful and even. They ate venison stew and biscuits, and James presented her with a small cake he had attempted to bake himself, lopsided but earnest in its effort. "It is terrible," he admitted, looking at the crooked layers. "It is perfect," Catherine said firmly, cutting them each a slice. And it was because he had made it for her, because it represented his effort and his love. Christmas was spent with the Brennans and several other families from the valley. Everyone crowded into the church for a service followed by a shared meal. Catherine felt the baby move for the first time that day, a flutter like butterfly wings inside her. She gasped and grabbed James's hand, pressing it to her belly. "Did you feel that?" James's eyes widened. "Is that the baby moving?" Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. "James, our baby is moving." He pulled her close, heedless of the people around them, and Catherine felt his shoulders shake slightly. "That is amazing," he whispered. "You are amazing." "We made this," Catherine said softly. "Together. A new life, our child." "The best thing I have ever done," James said, "was place that advertisement in the newspaper. The best decision I ever made was marrying you." "The best decision I ever made was answering," Catherine replied, and meant it with her whole heart. The winter was long and cold, but the house was warm and well stocked. James had ensured they had plenty of firewood, and Catherine kept stews simmering on the stove, filling the air with savory smells. They spent the long evenings reading aloud to each other, Catherine working her way through Tennyson, while James read from a book about cattle breeding Tom Brennan had loaned him. Sometimes they just talked, making plans for the spring, discussing names for the baby, imagining the future. "If it is a boy," James said one night, "I would like to name him Samuel after my father. He was not perfect, but he worked hard and tried to provide for us." "Samuel is a good name," Catherine agreed. "If it is a girl, I would like to name her Ruth after my mother." "Ruth, I like that." James smiled. "Ruth or Samuel Holloway, it sounds right." Catherine felt her heart swell. "Yes, it does." In February, when the snow lay deep and the world seemed frozen, Catherine woke one morning to a strange, pulling ache in her lower back. She lay still for a moment, trying to determine if this was the beginning of what she had been waiting for, or just another of the many discomforts of late pregnancy. The ache came again, stronger this time, wrapping around from her back to her belly. Catherine drew in a sharp breath, and beside her James stirred. "Catherine, what is wrong? I think the baby is coming." James was out of bed instantly, pulling on his clothes. "It is too early, you said May. Babies come when they want to, not when we expect them." Another pain gripped her and Catherine gasped. "James, you need to go get Mary and Sarah. I cannot do this alone." "I am not leaving you alone." "Then get help quickly, please." James looked torn, but he nodded. "I will ride to the Brennans. Tom can go get Sarah. I will be as fast as I can." He kissed her forehead, his lips lingering. "You are strong, Catherine. You can do this." "Go," Catherine said, managing a smile despite the fear churning in her stomach. "Hurry." He left at a run, and Catherine heard the barn door slam, heard the horses' hooves pounding away through the snow. She got up carefully, moving around the bedroom, doing the things Sarah had told her to do. Laying out clean linens, filling the basin with water, trying to stay calm. The pains came at irregular intervals, sometimes minutes apart, sometimes longer. Catherine paced and breathed and told herself that women had been doing this since the beginning of time, that her body knew what to do, that everything would be all right. It was mid-morning when she heard horses outside and the sound of voices. The door burst open and Mary hurried in, followed by Sarah and James, all of them covered in snow. "How are you doing, dear?" Mary asked briskly, already removing her coat and rolling up her sleeves. "How close are the pains?" "Close," Catherine managed. "They are getting stronger." "Good." "That is good. Sarah, get that water heated. James, you can wait in the other room." "I want to stay," James said. 3 women turned to look at him. Sarah shook her head. "This is not a place for men. You will just be in the way. She is my wife. That is my child." Catherine, despite the pain, felt warmth flood her chest at his words. "Let him stay," she said. "Please, I want him here." Mary looked doubtful, but she nodded. "Fine, but if you faint, we are dragging you out." James moved to Catherine's side, taking her hand. "I will not faint." The hours that followed were the longest and hardest of Catherine's life. The pains grew stronger and closer together until they seemed to blend into one continuous agony. She clung to James's hand, crushing his fingers, and he never once complained. He murmured encouragement, wiped her forehead with a cool cloth, supported her when she needed to walk or squat or change positions. "You are doing so well," he kept saying. "So strong, so brave. I love you so much." Mary and Sarah guided her through it, their voices calm and sure. "That is it, dear. You are doing fine. Almost there now. Just a bit more." When the urge to push came, Catherine bore down with all her strength, gritting her teeth against the pain. She heard herself making sounds she had never made before, primal and desperate. James held her, his face pale but determined, his voice steady in her ear. "You can do this, Catherine. You are the strongest person I know. Just a little more. Our baby is almost here." And then, after what felt like an eternity, a sudden relief, a rush of sensation, and a thin, angry wail that filled the room. "It is a boy," Mary announced triumphantly, lifting a small, red, squalling infant. "A healthy boy." Catherine collapsed back against James, tears streaming down her face. "A boy, we have a son." James's arms tightened around her, and she felt wetness on her face that was not her own tears. "A son," he repeated hoarsely. "Catherine, we have a son." Mary cleaned the baby quickly and expertly, then placed him in Catherine's arms. He was tiny and perfect, with dark hair plastered to his head and a face screwed up in indignation at being thrust into the cold world. Catherine touched his cheek with one trembling finger, overwhelmed by the rush of love she felt for this tiny creature. "Hello, Samuel," she whispered. "Hello, my son." James reached out to stroke the baby's head, his large, work-roughened hand impossibly gentle. "He is perfect," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You did so well, Catherine. I am so proud of you." Over the next hour, Mary and Sarah cleaned up efficiently while Catherine rested with the baby. Samuel had stopped crying and was now sleeping peacefully, his tiny fingers curled into fists. James sat on the edge of the bed, unable to stop staring at his son. "I cannot believe he is ours," he kept saying. "That we made him, that he is really here." "He is early," Catherine said worriedly. "Is that bad? He is so small." "He seems strong enough," Sarah reassured her. "Some babies just come early. As long as you keep him warm and fed, he should be fine." Mary nodded in agreement. "He has good lungs, that is for certain, and he latched on well when we tried to feed him. I think your boy will be just fine, Catherine." They stayed most of the day, making sure Catherine and the baby were stable, teaching her how to nurse and swaddle and care for this new life. By the time they finally left, promising to return in a few days to check on her, Catherine was exhausted but filled with a deep contentment. James insisted on doing all the household work for the next week, bringing Catherine meals in bed, changing Samuel's diapers, keeping the fire burning. He was amazingly competent for a man who had never been around babies, learning quickly how to soothe their son when he cried, how to support his head, how to change him without being peed on more than once or twice. "You are a natural," Catherine told him, watching as he walked the floor with Samuel against his shoulder, patting the baby's back. "He is easy to love," James said simply. "He is ours." As February gave way to March, the rhythm of their household adjusted to include this new person. Samuel was a relatively easy baby, sleeping for long stretches and crying only when he was hungry or needed changing. Catherine marveled at how quickly she adapted to motherhood, how natural it felt despite her earlier fears. She loved nursing him, loved the weight of him in her arms, loved watching James interact with their son. "Talk to him," she encouraged James. "Tell him about the ranch, about the work. He likes to hear your voice." So James narrated his days to his infant son. "Today we are going to check the south fence, Samuel. The snow is melting, so we need to make sure there are no breaks, and then we need to see how the cattle wintered. Your mother has been working hard to keep us all fed and warm. She is amazing, your mother. You are lucky to have her." Samuel, of course, could not understand the words, but he seemed to listen attentively, his dark eyes following his father's face. As the snow melted and spring returned to the valley, Catherine felt herself recovering from the birth. She was tired, certainly, and her body felt different, softer and rounder in new ways. But she was happy, happier than she had ever imagined being possible. She had a husband who loved her, a beautiful son, a home that was truly hers. One morning in April, almost exactly a year after her arrival in Montana, Catherine stood on the porch with Samuel in her arms, watching James ride out to check on the cattle. The mountains were still capped with snow, but the valley was greening, and the air smelled of earth and growing things. Samuel made a small sound, and Catherine looked down at his perfect face, then back up at the land stretching before her. A year ago she had arrived here with nothing, expecting to be ordered about, to be a servant in all but name. Instead, she had found partnership, respect, and love. She had found a home. "This ranch is yours as much as mine," James had told her on that first night. He had kept that promise, making her an equal partner in every decision, valuing her opinions, supporting her dreams. Together they had built something real and good, a marriage based on mutual respect and genuine affection. And now they had Samuel, this precious new life they had created together. Catherine pressed a kiss to her son's head and smiled as she saw James turn in his saddle and wave at her. She waved back, her heart full. She had come west expecting duty and hardship. She had found love instead, and that, she thought, was worth more than all the security and certainty she had left behind. As spring progressed, the ranch bustled with new activity. Billy Harper returned to help with the work, and James hired Peter Schultz again, along with another young man named Jack Morrison, who had just settled in the valley. Catherine, with Samuel strapped to her in a sling Mary had shown her how to make, worked in her expanded garden and helped with the household aspects of the ranch. "You do not have to work so hard," James protested more than once, watching her plant rows of vegetables with Samuel sleeping against her chest. "We can afford to hire someone to help." "I like the work," Catherine insisted. "It makes me feel useful, and besides, Samuel enjoys being outside. Look how peacefully he sleeps." It was true. Samuel seemed content as long as he could hear his parents' voices and feel the warmth of the sun. He was growing rapidly, his face filling out, his legs getting plumper. Everyone who visited commented on what a healthy, handsome baby he was. In May, on the one-year anniversary of Catherine's arrival, James surprised her by taking her into town. Tom Brennan agreed to watch Samuel for a few hours, and James drove Catherine to Stevensville with mysterious purpose. "Where are we going?" Catherine asked, puzzled when they did not stop at the general store. "You will see." He pulled up in front of a small building Catherine had never paid much attention to before. The sign read, "Miller's Jewelry and Watch Repair." James helped her down from the wagon and led her inside. The proprietor, an elderly man with spectacles, greeted them warmly. "Mr. Holloway, I have it ready, just as you specified." He produced a small box and handed it to James, who opened it carefully. Inside was a ring, simple but beautiful, a gold band with a small diamond set into it. James took Catherine's left hand, where her mother's thin band still circled her finger. "I should have had this for you a year ago," he said quietly. "I should have been able to offer you something more than just a wedding with no ring, but I was not prepared then. I am now." He slid the new ring onto her finger next to her mother's band. It fit perfectly. "Catherine Holloway, I love you more than words can express. This past year with you has been the happiest of my life. You have given me a home, a son, a reason to wake up grateful every morning. I promise to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you." Catherine could not speak past the lump in her throat. She looked at the ring, sparkling in the light from the window, then at James's earnest face. Finally, she managed, "You have always been worthy, from the very first day. You showed me kindness when I had nothing. You gave me partnership when I expected servitude. You loved me when I did not think I deserved love. You are the best man I have ever known, James Holloway, and I am proud to be your wife." She kissed him there in the jewelry shop, while Mr. Miller looked on with benevolent approval. When they broke apart, both of them were smiling through tears. "Thank you," Catherine whispered, touching the ring. "It is beautiful." "Not as beautiful as you," James said. And though it was a cliché, Catherine knew he meant it with his whole heart. They celebrated their anniversary that evening with the Brennans, who had insisted on hosting a dinner. Mary had cooked an elaborate meal, and Tom brought out a bottle of wine he had been saving for a special occasion. Samuel was passed from person to person, cooed over and cuddled, while Catherine and James told stories about their first year together. "I was terrified when I first saw her step off that train," James admitted. "She looked so proper, so educated, so far above a rough rancher like me. I thought she would take one look at the ranch and demand to go back east." "I was terrified too," Catherine said. "I thought you would be disappointed in me, that I would not be strong enough or skilled enough. But you were so kind, so patient. You made me believe I could do this." "You could always do it," James said firmly. "You just needed to believe in yourself. And I am grateful every day that you chose to stay." "Where else would I go?" Catherine said, looking at him with love. "This is my home. You are my home." Mary wiped her eyes. "Oh, that is just beautiful. You two are perfect for each other." As summer arrived, life on the ranch settled into a comfortable pattern. Samuel grew into a happy, curious baby who loved watching the animals and being carried around while his parents worked. Catherine started teaching a few children from neighboring farms 3 days a week in the autumn, using the main room of the house as a makeshift schoolroom. James supported this wholeheartedly, even building a bookshelf and several small benches to make the space more suitable. "You are a natural teacher," he told her after observing one of her lessons. "Those children love you." "I love doing it," Catherine admitted. "It makes me feel like I am contributing more than just household work." "You contribute everything," James said seriously. "This ranch would not function without you. I would not function without you." In September, Catherine realized she was pregnant again. This time the news was less shocking but no less joyful. James was thrilled, already talking about Samuel having a little brother or sister to play with. "Maybe we will have a daughter this time," he said hopefully. "A little girl with your gray eyes and determination." "Or another boy," Catherine said. "Either way, as long as the baby is healthy, I will be happy." This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because Catherine knew what to expect and was not dealing with the stress of adjusting to a new life. She continued her activities as much as possible, only slowing down in the final months as her belly grew large. Samuel, now a toddler learning to walk, was fascinated by his mother's changing shape. He patted her stomach gently and said "baby" with great pride, having been taught that a new sibling was coming. In May of 1886, during a warm spring rain, Catherine gave birth to a daughter. The labor was shorter than with Samuel, though no less intense. Mary and Sarah were there again, and James held Catherine's hand through the whole thing, never once leaving her side. When the baby emerged, wailing lustily, Mary laughed with delight. "A girl, a beautiful baby girl." Catherine held her daughter, marveling at her tiny features, the wisps of dark hair, the miniature fingers that gripped Catherine's thumb with surprising strength. "Hello, Ruth," she whispered. "Welcome to the world, my darling." James was completely besotted. He held his daughter with the utmost care, his large hands cradling her tiny body, his expression one of utter wonder. "She is perfect," he kept saying. "Absolutely perfect, just like her mother." Samuel, when he was finally allowed to meet his sister, regarded her with solemn curiosity. "Baby," he said again, reaching out to touch her hand. "Yes, this is your sister Ruth," Catherine told him. "You have to be gentle with her because she is very small." Samuel nodded seriously, as though he understood the great responsibility that had been placed upon him. As Ruth grew, she proved to be a different baby than Samuel had been. Where he had been calm and easy, she was spirited and demanding, crying loudly when she wanted something and refusing to be soothed by anyone except her parents. But she was also full of joy, laughing often, her face lighting up whenever James or Catherine entered her line of sight. "She has your spirit," James told Catherine, bouncing Ruth on his knee while she giggled. "Determined and strong-willed." "She has your stubbornness," Catherine retorted, but she was smiling. The years that followed were full and happy. Samuel grew into a thoughtful, gentle boy who loved the animals and followed his father everywhere, asking endless questions about the ranch. Ruth grew into a lively, bold girl who climbed everything and feared nothing, giving her parents more than a few heart attacks. In 1888, a third child arrived, another boy they named Thomas, after Tom Brennan, who had become like family to them. Thomas was a happy medium between his siblings, neither as quiet as Samuel nor as wild as Ruth, but easy-going and cheerful. The ranch prospered. James expanded the herd and purchased additional land to the north, as he had always planned. Catherine's garden grew larger each year, producing more than enough for their family and some to sell in town. Her teaching expanded as well, with more families asking if their children could attend her informal school. Eventually, with James's support, she petitioned the territorial government for funds to build a proper schoolhouse on their land. The request was granted, and in 1890 the Bitterroot Valley School opened, with Catherine as its teacher. "I am so proud of you," James said at the dedication ceremony, holding Thomas while Ruth clung to his leg and Samuel stood beside Catherine. "You saw a need and you filled it. You made this happen." "We made it happen," Catherine corrected. "You supported me every step of the way. You built half the schoolhouse yourself. This is our achievement, James, not just mine." And it was true. Everything they did together. They were true partners, making decisions jointly, supporting each other's dreams, working side by side to build not just a ranch but a life. On quiet evenings, after the children were asleep, they would sit on the porch as they had in the early days, watching the sun set behind the mountains. Sometimes they talked about their days, about the children, about plans for the future. Sometimes they simply sat in comfortable silence, holding hands, content in each other's presence. "You ever regret it?" James asked once. "Answering that advertisement, coming here. You could have had a different life, an easier life, maybe." Catherine turned to look at him, this man who had given her everything. "Never," she said firmly. "Not for a single moment. This life here with you is more than I ever dreamed possible. You gave me respect and partnership and love. You gave me a home and a family. You gave me myself." "How could I ever regret that?" James brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. "I am the lucky one. I placed an advertisement expecting a practical arrangement, maybe a friendship if I was fortunate. Instead, I got you, the love of my life, the best partner I could ever imagine. You made me happier than I knew I could be." "Then we are both lucky," Catherine said, leaning her head on his shoulder. They watched the sky darken, stars beginning to appear overhead. From inside the house came a small cry, probably Ruth having a bad dream, and Catherine started to rise. But James stopped her. "I will get her. You rest." She watched him go, this good man who still, after all these years, treated her as an equal partner, who had never once ordered her about or diminished her contributions, who had kept his promise that this ranch was hers as much as his. Catherine looked out at the land they had built together, the house that rang with children's laughter, the garden that flourished under her care, the barn and pastures where the cattle grazed. All of it was theirs, built through partnership and mutual respect and love. She had come west expecting servitude and had found freedom instead. She had expected orders and had received partnership. She had expected duty and had discovered love. The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own challenges and joys. In 1891, Catherine gave birth to their fourth child, a girl they named Mary, after Mary Brennan, who had become like a mother to Catherine. Mary Brennan herself was deeply moved, holding the baby and crying happy tears. "She is beautiful," the older woman said. "You have built such a wonderful family, Catherine. I am honored you would name her after me." "You have been family to us from the beginning," Catherine said warmly. "It seemed only right." Samuel, now 7, took his role as oldest sibling seriously, helping to look after his younger brothers and sisters. Ruth, at 5, was fiercely protective of the new baby, insisting on helping with everything. Thomas, at 3, was simply happy to have another person in the house to play with. James was 40 years old now, with gray beginning to show at his temples, but he was as strong and vital as ever. He had hired more permanent help as the ranch grew. Good men who respected both James and Catherine and who became part of their extended family. Billy Harper, who had started as a young ranch hand, now managed much of the day-to-day operations, freeing James to focus on expansion and planning. The schoolhouse Catherine ran became a fixture of the valley, with more than 20 children attending regularly. She taught reading, writing, arithmetic, history, and science, using the education her father had given her to pass knowledge on to the next generation. James was a frequent visitor, sometimes teaching the older boys about animal husbandry or letting them help with ranch work in the afternoons. In 1893, Montana achieved statehood, and there was a great celebration in Stevensville. The entire valley seemed to turn out, with music and dancing and speeches. Catherine stood with James, their 4 children around them, and felt a profound sense of belonging. This was her home now, truly and completely. She was not just Catherine who had come from Baltimore. She was Catherine Holloway, rancher's wife, teacher, mother, pillar of the community. "We have built something good here," James said that night as they danced together under the stars. "Not just the ranch, a life, a family, a community. We have," Catherine agreed, "and I would not change a single thing." In 1895, Peter Schultz, whose family Catherine and James had helped years earlier, came to them with a proposal. He wanted to purchase a section of the land James had bought to the north and start his own small ranch. His family had finally gotten on their feet, and he had saved enough for a down payment. James and Catherine discussed it at length. The land was good, productive, and could probably be sold for a good price. But Peter was a friend, someone they had helped when he was struggling. "What if we sold it to him for less than market value?" Catherine suggested. "Not so much less that we lose money, but enough that he can afford it more easily. We are doing well. We can afford to help." James smiled at her. "I love the way you think. Yes, let's do that. Peter is a good man. He deserves a chance to build something for his family the way we built this." Peter was overwhelmed with gratitude when they made the offer. "I will never forget this," he said, shaking James's hand firmly and then Catherine's. "You two have been nothing but kind to my family. I will pay you back, every penny, I swear it." "We know you will," Catherine said warmly. "We believe in you, Peter." As the century drew to a close, Catherine looked back on the 15 years since her arrival with a sense of profound gratitude. She had 4 healthy children who were growing up strong and smart. Samuel, now 13, was already talking about taking over the ranch someday. Ruth, at 11, had announced her intention to become a doctor, despite everyone telling her girls could not do such things. "Mother did what people said she could not do," Ruth had declared stubbornly. "She became a teacher and a partner in a ranch. I can become a doctor." Catherine had hugged her daughter close. "Yes, you can. Never let anyone tell you otherwise." Thomas, at 9, was interested in everything, constantly asking questions and taking things apart to see how they worked. Little Mary, at 7, had a gift for music, singing constantly and begging for piano lessons. "We should get a piano," James said one evening. "If Mary wants to learn, she should have the opportunity." "A piano is expensive," Catherine said, though she wanted one too. She had played a little as a child and missed it. "We can afford it, and you could play too. I know you used to." So a piano arrived, shipped by rail and hauled carefully to the ranch. It was installed in the main room, and Mary immediately fell in love with it. Catherine arranged for her to take lessons from a woman in Missoula, and soon the house was filled with music, sometimes beautiful, sometimes painfully discordant as Mary practiced. In 1899, as the new century approached, James and Catherine celebrated their 15th wedding anniversary with a party hosted by friends. It seemed like everyone in the valley attended, crowding into the church hall with food and music and laughter. People made toasts, telling stories about the couple who had built not just a successful ranch but a true partnership. When Catherine first arrived, Tom Brennan said, standing to address the crowd, some of us were not sure she would make it. She was a city girl not used to our ways. But she proved us all wrong. She worked hard, learned fast, and became one of us. And James, well, James has always been a good man. But with Catherine beside him, he became a great man. Together they have shown us all what a marriage should look like. Equal partners, working toward common goals, supporting each other's dreams. We are lucky to have them in our community. Everyone applauded, and Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. James squeezed her hand, his own eyes suspiciously bright. Later, as they danced together while their children played with other families' children, James said, 15 years. It has gone so fast. And yet I can barely remember life before you, Catherine said. It feels like we have always been together. I hope we have at least 15 more, James said. Maybe 30, maybe 50. I will take as many as we can get, Catherine said, resting her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. As the new century dawned in 1900, the ranch was more prosperous than ever. James and Catherine had expanded further, now running more than 500 head of cattle and employing a dozen men regularly. The schoolhouse had been expanded twice, and Catherine now had an assistant teacher to help manage the growing number of students. Samuel, at 16, was actively involved in running the ranch, showing a natural talent for the work. Ruth, at 14, was studying everything she could find about medicine, already planning her path to medical school. Thomas, at 12, had developed an interest in engineering and spent his free time designing elaborate irrigation systems for the ranch. Mary, at 10, was becoming an accomplished pianist, sometimes playing for church services. We did well, Catherine said one night as she and James reviewed the ranch accounts. 4 healthy, happy children, a thriving ranch, a good life. We did, James agreed. But it is not over yet. We still have years ahead of us. He was right. The years continued, bringing more challenges and more joys. In 1902, Samuel married a young woman named Elizabeth from a neighboring ranch, and they built a house on the northern edge of the property. In 1904, they made Catherine and James grandparents with the birth of a son they named James, after his grandfather. I am too young to be a grandmother, Catherine protested, though she was clearly delighted, cradling her tiny grandson. You are the youngest grandmother I have ever seen, James agreed, putting his arm around her shoulders. And the most beautiful. Ruth left for the East Coast in 1905 to attend a women's medical college, one of the few that would accept female students. Catherine cried when she left, proud but heartbroken to see her daughter go so far away. But Ruth wrote faithfully, sharing her experiences, and returned home whenever she could. Thomas enrolled in an engineering program in Bozeman in 1907, while Mary continued her music studies, eventually becoming the music teacher at the school Catherine had founded. As they entered their later years, James and Catherine gradually stepped back from the most physically demanding work, letting Samuel and the other ranch hands take over more responsibility. But they remained active, involved in decision-making, still partners in every sense. In 1909, on their 25th wedding anniversary, their children arranged a surprise celebration. Samuel and Elizabeth hosted it at their house, with all their children and grandchildren present. Ruth came home from her medical practice in Denver, where she had finally achieved her dream. Thomas brought his wife, a fellow engineer he had met at school. Mary played the piano beautifully, performing pieces she had composed herself. James and Catherine stood together, looking at the family they had created, the life they had built. 25 years, Catherine said softly. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that I stepped off that train, so nervous and uncertain. And now look at us, James said. 4 children, 3 of them married or established in careers, grandchildren, a ranch that has grown beyond what I ever imagined, and you. He turned to face her fully. Still the love of my life. Still the best decision I ever made. Catherine touched his face gently, seeing the lines that time had etched there, the gray in his hair, the evidence of a life lived fully. She knew she had changed too, her own hair now streaked with silver, her hands showing the work of years. But when James looked at her, she still saw the same love in his eyes that had been there from the beginning. "You kept your promise," she said quietly. "You told me this ranch was mine as much as yours. You made me a true partner. You never ordered me, never diminished me, never made me feel less than equal. You gave me everything I needed to flourish. How can I ever thank you for that?" "You do not need to thank me," James said. "You gave me just as much. You made this house a home. You raised our children with love and wisdom. You built a school that has educated dozens of children. You have been my partner in every sense, my best friend, my love. I am the one who should be thanking you." They kissed there, in front of their children and grandchildren, and everyone applauded. As the years advanced into the 1910s, Catherine and James settled into a comfortable routine. They spent their mornings working on projects that interested them. Catherine writing a book about teaching on the frontier, James mentoring young ranchers who came to him for advice. Their afternoons were for grandchildren, who loved visiting the ranch where their parents had grown up. Their evenings were for each other, sitting on the porch as they had done for decades, watching the sun set behind the eternal mountains. "We have had a good life," James said one evening in 1914, as they celebrated Catherine's 52nd birthday quietly at home. "We have," Catherine agreed. "Better than I ever dreamed possible. Do you remember that first night when I told you this ranch was yours as much as mine? I remember everything about that night. I was so surprised. No one had ever offered me partnership like that before. I meant it then, and I mean it now. Everything we have built, we built together. Equal partners." Catherine leaned against him, comfortable in his embrace after so many years. "I married you expecting orders," she said softly. "And instead you gave me freedom. I came here expecting to serve, and instead you made me a leader. I thought I was trading one prison for another, and instead I found a home. Thank you for that, James. Thank you for seeing me as an equal when the world told you not to. Thank you for taking a chance on a lonely rancher in Montana. Thank you for building this life with me. Thank you for loving me." He kissed the top of her head. "I love you, Catherine Holloway, today and always." "I love you too," Catherine said. "Forever." They sat together as darkness fell, two people who had started as strangers and had become so much more, partners in work and in life. Best friends, lovers, the foundation of a family that would continue for generations. The ranch would endure, passed down to Samuel and eventually to his children. The school would continue, with Mary taking over as head teacher when Catherine finally retired. Ruth would become a respected physician, helping countless people with the skills she had fought so hard to acquire. Thomas would design irrigation systems that would help farms and ranches throughout Montana become more productive. But all of that started here, with a woman who answered an advertisement out of desperation, and a man who offered partnership instead of commands. With a marriage that began as a practical arrangement and became a profound love story. With two people who chose, every single day, to be partners, to respect each other, to build something beautiful together. As the stars emerged overhead, Catherine thought about that frightened young woman who had stepped off the train 29 years ago, carrying everything she owned in a single trunk, facing an uncertain future. She wished she could tell that young woman that everything would be all right, that she would find not just security but happiness, not just a home but a family, not just a husband but a true partner and the love of her life. "What are you thinking?" James asked softly. "That I am grateful," Catherine said simply, "for all of it, every moment, every challenge, every joy. I am grateful for the life we have built, and I am most grateful for you." James tightened his arm around her. "The feeling is entirely mutual." They sat together in comfortable silence, two old friends who had traveled far together and knew they would continue on, side by side, for whatever years remained. The ranch was quiet around them, peaceful in the growing dark. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed softly. From the house came the faint sound of Mary playing the piano, practicing for Sunday's church service. Samuel's house showed warm lights in the windows, another generation making their own life on this land. It was perfect. It was home. And it all existed because one man had placed an advertisement, and one woman had been brave enough to answer. Because that man had offered partnership, and that woman had accepted it. Because they had chosen each other, day after day, year after year, building something that would outlast them both. "This ranch is yours as much as mine," James had said on that first night, and he had meant it. In doing so, he had given Catherine not just land or a house, but dignity, respect, and voice. He had given her a partnership that transformed her life, and allowed her to become more than she had ever thought possible. And she, in turn, had given him a home filled with love, a family to be proud of, and a partnership that made them both stronger than they could have been alone. That was their legacy. Not just the successful ranch or the school or the children who had gone on to do remarkable things, but the example they set of what a marriage could be when built on mutual respect, genuine partnership, and abiding love. As the moon rose over the Bitterroot Valley, Catherine and James sat together on their porch, exactly where they belonged, grateful for the journey that had brought them to this moment and eager for whatever tomorrow would bring, as long as they faced it together. Their story was not one of dramatic rescues or grand gestures. It was quieter than that, but no less powerful. It was the story of two people who found each other when both needed finding, who built something beautiful together through hard work and mutual support, who loved each other through easy times and hard times, and who created a legacy that would echo through generations. It was a love story written in morning conversations over coffee, in shared glances across crowded rooms, in hands held on quiet evenings, in decisions made together, in challenges faced as a team, in laughter and tears and everything in between. It was, quite simply, a life well lived and a love well earned. And that, Catherine thought as she sat beside her husband beneath the stars, was all anyone could really ask for. The end.